Welcome back to One Stop News. I'm Michael Rommel. Today's March the 26th, and I've got a weekend review for you. I'm sorry I wasn't here Wednesday, but I had a very busy week. I didn't have time to record and produce a segment, so I've got a busy day for you today. A lot's been going on this week, and again, I'm just going to jump right into it. So the first story today is the London attack by a lone wolf terrorist. Now, on Wednesday, he drove across the Westminster Bridge through a fence near Parliament and killed 5 and wounded over 50 in a horrific attack right by the British Parliament. Those killed were Aisha Frade, Leslie Rhodes, Kurt Cochran, and Officer Keith Palmer. The first 3 were killed when the car went through the fence, and Keith Palmer was killed when the attacker jumped out of the car and stabbed him before the attacker was shot dead. The attacker was an English citizen, and he was flagged by intelligence services as a possible extremist, but there was not enough evidence or anything like that to actually take him in. 11 were arrested in connection with this attack, but most were released after initial questioning. Now, if you want to know more about the victims or the attacker, I prefer not to talk really about the attacker much. I will link an article to the British Broadcasting Company, and you can read about either the victims or the attacker there. And now moving on from that, in Russia, opposition leader Alexei Navalny has been arrested. There were protests against the government for corruption. They were mainly focusing on Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev. Again, terrible pronunciation sometimes. Now, there are reports from the ground that suggest that this protest is the biggest since the protests against the government in 2011 and 2012. And if so, that's a strong showing before an election year that pits Putin up, possibly against Alexei Navalny, but he is technically barred from running, so we'll see how that goes. Now, it's likely Navalny will be released soon, but if he's not, I will make sure to do an update on that story. In the Congo, 40 soldiers have been decapitated by the Kamwina Nsapu militant group. This continues the further instability in Congo as President Kabila refuses to give up his rule, which he's scheduled to do this year, to hold elections at which he is barred from running in. The attack happened in the Kasai region, and there are vicious reports of the violence in the region. There's also 2 missing UN experts who were investigating alleged human rights abuses in the village of Bunkande near the city of Kanaga. They also went missing along with 4 Congo people. I don't know the correct Congolese men. Their names they've been identified as Michael Sharp, who's an American citizen, Zaida Catalan, Swede. 2 of the people from Congo have been identified. It's Betu Tishintela, a Congolese interpreter, and Isaac Kubuayi, a driver, and then 2 other unidentified motorbike drivers. I hope for their safe return, but in the Congo, it's not a great chance that they're still alive. Moving on to Iraq and Syria with ISIS. An explosion in a suburb in Mosul has reportedly killed over 100. Raqqa, the Islamic State's official capital, the dam that provides the city with power and also keeps the floodwaters from hitting the city, is currently in a state of disrepair, and there is serious concern that with the rising water that it may break and flood the region, which would be a massive disaster in a region that's already seen a lot of war and a lot of the problems associated with it. Satellite reports show that it's straining to hold the water, and ISIS has claimed that an airstrike has weakened it, but security forces from the West and from coalition groups fighting ISIS have said it's likely that they're just not maintaining it well because they don't have the engineers or the expertise to really maintain this kind of dam. So hopefully it'll hold and save the lives of countless people, but we'll see what happens. Now moving back to Europe, in Belarus, hundreds of protesters have been arrested in a crackdown in the capital Minsk. The Belarusian government has defended its detainment of the prisoners, saying that it was an unauthorized protest and it was illegal for them to do so. They are protesting a law that taxes those who are unemployed for more than 6 months. They call this basically a laziness tax, but it's mainly targeted at those who work under the table, as everyone in Belarus is essentially given a sort of job by a government in a very socialist kind of manner. So it's mainly targeting those who are working jobs that are not associated with the government, that are not an official job. Now, there are also concerns from the opposition in Belarus, as senior opposition figure Mikhail Statskevich has not been seen for 3 days, and the government has denied any knowledge of his whereabouts. So he may return, he may not, and I'm sure there will be more updates on Belarus soon, as it does not seem to be in a state of calm. And just a quick update, in Egypt, former ruler Hosni Mubarak has been freed after spending 6 years in prison. The current Egyptian President Sisi was on the fence about releasing him because of possible bad press, but he did it very quietly, and Mubarak is now a free man. In the Gambia, Adama Barrow has set up a truth commission to investigate the abuses committed under the Jammeh rule since 1984 when he came to power. They are looking to investigate corruption, human rights abuses, and allegations of torture that were perpetuated under the regime. They're doing so to try and provide reparations to those who suffered or the family members of those killed by the regime. And it's another good step for democracy in the Gambia. And it appears that Adama Barrow is trying to keep his campaign promises and trying to move Gambia into a more free state. UN has made the decision to probe into abuses against the Rohingya people in Myanmar. Myanmar has protested this, as they're saying obviously there's something wrong. China and India have abstained from this. They seem to be acknowledging that there's probably something going on, but because of geopolitics in the region, they're not going to explicitly endorse any kind of probe. The probe was brought by the European Union, and this comes after a report last month of horrific abuses by soldiers on the Rohingya people, gang rapes, mass murders, and just a whole slew of torture and other abuses. So the UN will be looking into what is going on, and there are a lot of reports from people in refugee camps in Bangladesh that these instances are quite common. And the final bit of international news today, in France, Marine Le Pen has urged to drop the sanctions from the European Union onto Russia, citing that they are detrimental to both the European Union and Russia. And she's also claiming that Crimea was always a part of Russia and that they were okay in seizing it. This is another development that seems to link Marine Le Pen to Russia, and also with all the Russian influence in the French election, which is still alleged, and there's no smoking gun here yet, but there's a lot of suspicious things going on, to say the least. So we'll see what happens. She's still currently under scrutiny for her ties to Russian banks and her friendliness to Russia that seems to be more than just ideology. And finally, on to Trump news. It actually hasn't been that crazy of a week for Trump. I'm going to cover 3 key things that happened, because if I covered every minute detail, I would probably tear my hair out, so I'm just going to cover 3 major things that happened this week. So Trump and Republicans were forced to withdraw their health care bill after they couldn't rally support for it. The Freedom Caucus in the House, which is a formation from the Tea Party movement several years ago, has basically rallied hard against it. They want it to be more severe in its repeal. They want to repeal basically all of it rather than to try and keep some provisions of it that people like. So this is probably not the last time we'll see a Republican attempt to at least alter Obamacare, but this one has failed, and it's definitely a big blow to Paul Ryan and Trump's agenda, although they're not resting, and Trump's team appears to be moving towards tax reform instead of healthcare reform, so they're just moving on to the next thing and regrouping on this issue. Links between the Trump administration and Russia continue to grow. Former campaign manager Paul Manafort has been linked to a contract, a $10 million a year contract with a Russian billionaire who was close to Putin to lobby Western governments on behalf of the Putin regime. This is really problematic, especially because he did not register it under the basically the Foreign Lobbyist Act that requires anyone lobbying on behalf of a foreign government to register with the country. And since he was getting $10 million a year, it's not like he was, doing a very minor thing. He was the former campaign manager for Trump, and he still is reported to be in touch, this particularly with Mike Pence and Trump himself. This is a very severe link to it. There's more on this, but this was the Associated Press story, and I will provide a link directly in the description if you want to read the full story on this, as it's a fantastic bit of investigative journalism. And the final bit on Trump news and just news in general today, there are reports coming out that former National Security Advisor Lieutenant General Michael Flynn was in talks with people connected to the Erdogan regime in Turkey to possibly maybe illegally extradite the cleric Fethullah Gulen, who Erdogan has basically accused of being the ringleader of the attempted coup that failed last year. There's not a whole lot of evidence to back this up. The coup there's still a lot of questions about the coup that we will likely never know, but it was a giant purge of people who were suspected of being affiliated with Gulen and other people that they did not think were close to the regime. This comes after issues with both Turkey and Lieutenant General Michael Flynn's conflicts of interest with Turkey and Russia, and just makes Erdogan look even more complicit in a scheme to really become the dictator of Turkey. So this will be an important thing to watch as the vote to the constitutional reform hits the public and possibly gives Erdogan the essential ability to become a dictator. And so that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. I'll be back Wednesday this week, and I'll see you then.